Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here on Thursday, December 5th, 2013 at just a hair after 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, today's little exercise in self-indulgence has to do with, it's in two parts. One involves a newspaper article, which I will show you. Let me show you. That's it. This is from the Columbus Dispatch of Monday, December 2nd. And it talks about an art exhibit that is currently hung inside our church in the nave. And the fellow who does this, has a website called Sacred Art Pilgrim. All in one word, of course, sacredartpilgrim.com. And this fellow collects religious art, sacred art that has been created since, from the 20th century onward. Although I think he may have a couple of pieces from the very late 19th century. But his criteria to be included in his collection is, religious art created in the 20th century up to the present time. And, regardless of the medium and regardless of the origin of, the location where from which it originates, and he's mounted now. This is probably the 6th exhibit he's mounted. And when he does one of these exhibits, he will generally commission at least one piece. And in this case, I guess he's commissioned 3 pieces for this exhibition. Because he knows he's developed a network of friendships and relationships and with these various artists, all over the world, and some of the stuff he's shown us is it's all interesting. It's all interesting, and it may or not be the person's particular taste. I mean, it's art. Not all art's going to be to everybody's taste, and but it's always very thought provoking, and it's always very very helpful and useful to hear him describe the artist and how he encountered the artist and going to their studios and seeing how they do this stuff and make this art and the way they work, the way they get inspired, where they get the idea or their inspiration or whatever artistic impulse moves them to create this stuff. And it's just absolutely fascinating, and he'll generally have about anywhere from 25 to 35 pieces in any one exhibit. Typically they've gone up during Advent and Lent and Easter. Although I think 1 year we sort of got kind of off cycle, and it was Advent, Epiphany. But at least during three of the liturgical seasons of non-ordinary time, these exhibits will be up, and they're very interesting. And this is now, I think, going on the 3rd or 4th year he's done this, and it's starting now to get some news media attention, which such as it is in the Columbus Dispatch, but. This fellow is a very, very serious collector. I don't know how he stores all this stuff. Now he spends about 5 or 6 months a year in Cyprus, and he's got a place here, I guess I'm assuming it's near Delaware or in Worthing, in Central Ohio. And he's almost got to have some sort of warehouse space for all this art because it's some of this stuff's relatively fragile. I mean, it's, some of it's made on cardboard and, you know, scraps of wood and things like that. And, some of it's done with crayon, really thick crayon. I mean, there's all sorts of media that are used to make this. And a lot, there's sculpture, and, you know, some, some things, guys stand in a village and just bang this stuff out and make objects of religious art. Uh, so, as one might expect here, coming up on Advent, this particular exhibit has to do with various varieties of nativity scenes that are not your standard saccharine nativity scenes. The one that's described here that I found particularly interesting was, which I had seen last Sunday, because it was hung on. It was the first day it was really hung so that we could observe it was December 1st. Obviously, it had been hung a day or two before. Is a fellow. Let's see here. The Texas artist is named James Jangnet, or Janknegt. Depicts the manger as a cardboard box outside of a Walmart dumpster, and you've got people going by with their shopping carts and so forth. It's very interesting. Interesting, very interesting piece. And a lot of this art is in line with a lot of the late 20th century emphasis on Mary was an unmarried kid and having a problem and worried about stuff, and it doesn't emphasize her submission to the divine. It emphasizes this whole sort of human dilemma, and then of course the human nature of Christ as opposed to the divine nature of Christ. I mean, that's the emphasis, and that's the emphasis. Now I think anybody who's listened to me knows I tend to have a bit more of a higher Christology emphasis in this, but he had two natures. So we have to take all this stuff very seriously, and now there was a picture involved in this. I'm going to hold the picture a little closer. Let's see if I can get it up close here. Now, I don't know how they got this shot. That's a great shot. Maybe they had a little helicopter, one of these little drone helicopters flying around shooting down the church. But if you look closely, you can see there's some handmade kneelers under the pews. And here's the fellow who is the curator, so to speak, giving a little talk to various folks. And it seems this guy at one point was a former Moscow bureau chief for Time magazine. I hadn't realized that, but I knew that might explain the Cyprus connection, because we know there's a lot of Russian money down in Cyprus, which we found out during their bank failures here the last, year or so ago. Who knows? He's a very interesting guy. His dad's in his late 80s, and will often come to church with him, and I think there's a sort of a Norwegian background. And this guy, and then occasionally this fellow's, how shall we say, associate will come with he and his dad, or with him and his dad, more properly. And haven't seen him around for a while. I don't know what happened to him, but in that case, so it's great. And so, I mean, obviously, I think you can tell from my attitude toward this that I'm very much in favor of this, and I'm certainly not envious of this man. We're not supposed to be envious, and envy's never been one of my pride and arrogance are my sins of choice, but not envy. As long as I've got food and shelter and clothes and heat, well, that sort of is subsumed under, or assumed and subsumed under shelter. You know, it's nice to have a book or two to read, but I think people who've listened to me know that I'm pretty satisfied. Particularly if I'm not getting gratuitous grief. Now, under the heading of gratuitous grief, let us move along. Like a moth to the flame. Like a moth to the flame. I got an associated note with this newspaper clipping from one of my favorite interlocutors. Not any of the email interlocutors I've This individual is not a subscriber, so the various subscriber interlocutors I have, this is I am not violating any of you guys' confidences. Well, I don't know if I'm violating a confidence here either, because essentially I have been falsely charged. Allow me to rebut. It says, see enclosed evidence. Well, we've discussed the enclosed evidence. Contrary to your underlined idea that I have no memory, I do underlined. Indeed, remember you were discussing this person in the past. All double underlined of his collection occasionally shown in the walls outside triple underlined. The sanctuary, exclamation point. Well, I'm a bit puzzled. I mean, obviously, I had talked about these exhibitions in the past with her, and okay, it's great. I don't quite see the relevance of where the particular location is. I mean, our church is what the Germans call a Hallenkirche format. It's not a long rectangular building. It has sort of like the golden mean proportions of a rectangular building, and of course you have a sanctuary / chancel area up toward the front with an apse toward the back, and the altar's under the apse. Sometimes the altar has been moved forward closer to the front of the chancel area from time to time. But first of all, in a non-cathedral church setting, in a non-cruciform building setting, terms like sanctuary, first of all, sanctuary isn't really even a standard church term in terms of church architecture. Choir, nave, choir, apse, those are standard architectural terms. But occasionally shown in the walls outside triple underlined sanctuary. Okay, well, all right. Well, perhaps it'll become clearer. I don't know. We'll find out. Okay, if I am not wrong, the guy is, at least in this article, underlined, and photo, is doing his thing, in quotes, inside, double underlined, the church. Well, of course it's inside the church. The man's not going to hang this stuff outside the building. I mean, it'd get destroyed in the weather. A lot of this stuff's on cardboard and stuff, as I pointed out. Exclamation point. Not on my part, on the writer's part. If I am not mistaken, I will eat humble pie, but I've never seen pews and kneelers inside, underlined, a gallery, only outside, underlined, in the sanctuary. Well, now I am confused. The pews and kneelers are obviously in the church. That's where the art is hung. Am I missing some distinction here? Am I? Is there a subtle point that somehow has eluded me in the past? I mean, that's possible. Well, soldiering on. Oh, there's another exclamation point. I'm sorry. He's an interesting person. Well, yes, he is. But of course, I love it. But of course, you wouldn't like him. Oh, I love that assumption. I think it's very clear from what I've said that obviously I do like and admire the guy. Well, I mean, I admire the guy. I mean, he certainly seems likable enough. I've not socialized with the guy. I mean, he's certainly not an overt, objectionable individual. So yeah. First pass assumption is I like the guy. That's like anybody you meet, who's not objectionable. Your first pass assumption is you like the guy. Well, unless you're maybe anyway. But of course, you wouldn't like him because, forget his wealth. Well, once again, we addressed that. I mean, I have no problem with people who have a lot of money. Good for them. Assuming it's honestly made. Good for them. Frankly, I don't have much problem with people who have a lot of money dishonestly made. I guess then there's no point to spending time on that because otherwise you'd be spending your time on a lot of stuff that you can't do anything about anyway. Possibly because, forget what, you might disagree with his concept of what constitutes religious art. Well, what's interesting is you actually get the conflation of three issues in that one sentence. His being an interesting person, okay. Me liking or not liking him. Well, actually, four issues. A dismissal of the wealth issue. Okay, so maybe now we're back down to three issues. But me not liking him because I have some disagreement over his concept of what constitutes religious art. Oh, a disagreement about art as a reflection on his value as a human being. Think of all the leaps that were involved in writing that one sentence. Think of all the intellectual leaps and jumps and gaps, discontinuities that were involved in writing that one sentence. It's at this point that I'm glad I decided to do this video. I had doubts about doing this, but I think that's good. Now, we got one more to go, and then now that might constitute the end of this. I'm assuming, of course, he is a member of our church, or at least contributes to the church. Well, now see, that's a very interesting qualification. So, if he were not a member of the church and didn't contribute to the church, then I would be allowed to actually disagree with his concept of art. What an interesting qualification to obtain license to disagree with somebody's concept of art. Which I don't necessarily do, by the way. there's certain of these selections I'm not particularly fond of, like anything else, but it's art, guys. Now there are a lot of things that are called art that clearly aren't art. It's just vandalism and crime. I am thinking, of course, of my favorite example of this installation mounted at the Brooklyn Art Institute some years ago under the name of, dear God, forgive me on this, but this is just stating a fact, under the name of Piss Christ. It involved a crucifix sitting in a mason jar full of urine. This was called art. No, that's not art. That's not art. That's like a bag of dog crap that somebody would set fire on somebody's front porch. That's not art. That's a crime. Now, under our constitutional system, where the First Amendment, basically trumps any degree of common sense, and you can't go down that slippery slope. So we have to live this way. I mean, we just have to. There's no other reasonable way to do it and maintain peace. Civic comedy. Well, maybe not comedy, but civic. More or less nonviolent. You have to put up with that kind of stuff. Now, I don't know if we necessarily need to use tax dollars to support it, like was done for this little thing there in New York, that Brooklyn a few years back. But there's going to be objectionable art, displayed in public, no matter what the time, no matter what the era or the time, or it's like this Robert Mapplethorpe exhibit there in the Cincinnati Art Institute there, in Cincinnati, in which he had a series of shots of guys with whips hanging out of their behinds. And it was very interesting to read an interview I run of one of Robert Mapplethorpe's friends, and this was after, I guess, Mapplethorpe had died. And the guy says, I said to Robert, he said, did you have to have the thing hanging out of the guy's behind? Like, want to make a statement, but, perhaps you could somehow, well, of course, you didn't want to moderate its impact. All right, man. Anyway, but that wasn't necessary. But that was not supported by public money. See, that wasn't supported by public money. Now, it was in a publicly supported institution, but the exhibit wasn't commissioned by the public tax dollars, I understand it. Now, so there's a difference there. Well, it's like all this stuff that's going to be coming up now about, Christmas trees and nativity scenes in public and, in front of courthouses and, you get the militant atheists, carrying on. It's going to be sad. You can just see this stuff ginning up. Well, I thought it was an interesting exercise to go through. I resisted doing this, but I thought, well, uncritical thought needs to be addressed. Now, there's still some sort of underlying assumption here that a distinction, it's obviously inside the church. Is there? I'm puzzled. I am puzzled. So, yeah, all right. I want to thank my subscribers for putting up with some of this stuff here. Not necessarily this one today. This one I think's fairly legitimate, but there were a couple of things here back this weekend here that perhaps were here more self-indulgent than they needed to be. But it's YouTube after all. It's all self-indulgent, but more self-indulgent than they needed to be. But, I appreciate their communication with me about that. Alrighty now, I'm going to say bye-bye now, YouTubers.